For as long as we've been human, we've been drawn to the water's edge. It's this timeless act, right? Patience, skill, and just a little bit of hope. It's something that has sustained us for thousands and thousands of years. Today, we're going to dive into the long and, honestly, fascinating story of how we fish. And this quote, it really gets to the heart of it all. See, fishing isn't just about getting food on the table, it's a cultural cornerstone. It has literally shaped our economies, built entire communities, and defined our relationship with the natural world. So that's the big question, isn't it? How did we make that jump? The journey from a simple personal act of survival to a massive global industry, well, it's an incredible story of innovation, ambition, and this relentless push to master the oceans. Okay, so let's start at the very, very beginning. We're talking way before farming, a time when fishing wasn't a hobby or an industry. It was absolutely critical for survival. So let's just wrap our heads around this timeline for a second. We are talking about a practice that is truly ancient. I mean, look at these dates. We were fishing long before we were farming. And these simple tools, things like bone hooks and woven nets, they were revolutionary. They're what allowed the very first permanent human settlements to spring up along rivers and coasts. That fundamentally changed how we all lived. It was all about using what you had, whether that meant carving hooks from bone or twisting flax into lines strong enough to pull a big catfish out of the Nile. For most of human history, if you caught a fish, it was for your family or maybe your village. But then, a huge shift happened. Fish went from just being food to being a commodity, something to be traded, sold, and shipped across the world. And that changed everything. So in the Middle Ages, you start to see fishing really shaping local economies. But then came the vessels that could actually take on the open ocean. The Dutch herring bus was this massive ship, like 20 meters long, and it basically became the blueprint for European fishing boats for centuries. And get this, one of the oldest, longest-lasting trade routes in the world is for salt cod. It started with the Vikings, and it's been connecting the cold northern waters with southern Europe for over 1,000 years. So if trade was the first big shift, the Industrial Revolution was an earthquake. This is when fishing went from a craft to a full-blown global industry, powered by steam and built from steel. The age of sail, it produced true masters of the sea. Fishermen in places like Brixham, England, developed these incredibly sleek and fast trawlers. They were marvels of their time, for sure. They could make long trips, they could tow heavy nets, but they were always, always at the mercy of the wind. And now you see this. This is the massive leap in power. Suddenly, fishermen weren't just sailors. They had to be engineers. They were no longer limited by the weather. Steam power gave them the range to reach totally new, untapped fishing grounds and just the brute strength to pull gear that the old sail-powered ships could only dream of. So let's break down what made this revolution happen. First, steel hulls. That meant stronger boats that could handle the absolute harshest seas. Then, steam engines. That gave them relentless power, speed, and range. And with all that power, they could deploy these enormous heavy trawl nets. This combination transformed tiny coastal villages like Grimsby into these bustling centers of a global trade network, all fueled by fish. But hold on, the story of fishing isn't just about industrial might. While all those commercial fleets were conquering the oceans, a totally different revolution was happening on a much smaller scale. Fishing was also evolving from a necessity into an art form, a sport, and a beloved pastime. And this is a really crucial shift in our mindset. For the first time, on a really large scale, people weren't fishing just to eat. They were doing it for fun, for pleasure, for sport. It became a way to relax, to connect with nature, and to test your own skill against a fish. The art of angling has this rich history all its own. It started with books that really celebrated the spirit of the sport, but then technology took over. Bamboo rods offered this amazing new strength and flexibility. Then the invention of the modern spinning reel in 1905, that was a total game changer. It made casting farther and with lighter lures possible for anyone. And by the 1950s, new materials made quality gear accessible to pretty much everyone. Okay, so let's swing back to the commercial world and enter the modern age. This is an era defined by a scale of fishing that was just once unimaginable. This is the age of the super trawler. Just take a look at this number, 60 tons. Let that sink in. That's the potential haul for a single trip on the world's very first super trawler. This isn't just a small improvement, it's a quantum leap in our ability to pull life from the sea. The ship that started it all was the Fair Tree. Before this boat, trawlers had to pull their nets in over the side, which really limited the size of the catch. But the Fair Tree was the first to pull its massive nets straight over the stern from the back. It sounds like a simple change, but it was revolutionary. It allowed them to lift that incredible 60-ton haul, and it became the blueprint for nearly every super trawler that followed. And this table right here, it brings the whole journey into perfect focus. Just look at the progression. We went from 1 or 2 people in a simple reed boat to a crew of 30 on a massive sailing vessel, all the way to a modern diesel-powered factory that just floats on the water. Each step represents this monumental leap in technology, in power, and crucially, in our impact on the oceans themselves. So here we are. We've spent 40,000 years getting better and better and better at catching fish. We've gone from survival to sport to a massive global industry. But as our technology becomes almost godlike in its power, we're left with a pretty heavy question. This relentless innovation has brought us to a point of incredible efficiency. So the next chapter of this story will be defined not just by what we can do, but by the choices we make with all that power.